This is Dr. Tami Dean, and you are listening to the Equity Hour podcast. I am so excited to be here with you today. My goal is that as a listener, you leave with new ideas, resources, and actionable steps for your educational community. Let's explore how we can use our voices for equity and social justice today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Equity Hour with me, your host, Dr. Tami. I am so excited to bring another amazing equity educator to your ears today in our newest episode. Today, we have with us Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. Hello, Kwame. Welcome.
Hi, Dr. Tami. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Let me tell you all a little bit about Kwame. Kwame is the founder of Identity-Talk Consulting, a global educational consulting firm that specializes in developing K-12 educators into identity-affirming educators. Rooted in the core values of equity, empowerment, and authenticity, Identity-Talk Consulting provides a range of professional learning experiences, including keynote speaking, virtual and in-person trainings, leadership consulting, and e-courses to help educators sharpen their cultural responsiveness and anti-bias, anti-racist practices. His latest book, Learning to Relearn, Supporting Identity in a Culturally Affirming Classroom, has received multiple awards, and we are going to talk more about that today, and I'm super excited about that. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Look, that was a bio, I'm telling you. I love it. Okay, we're going to dive right in. As you know, Kwame, I always start with each of my guests really talking about how they got into the work of equity, a little bit about their equity journey, because to me, it is really important for people to understand that this work isn't a one and done. It's not like I've done a workshop, I've read a book, I've listened to a podcast episode like this, right?
Not at all.
Not at all. Exactly. I've been doing this for over 25 years. I feel like I'm still always learning something. There are areas in which I have more knowledge than others. And so I always think it's really important for people to know you can start where you are and then continue to go, from there. And there's always something to learn along the way. And so tell us a little bit about your story into getting into this work.
Yeah, so I've been in education for about 18 years. I started my career as a middle school math teacher in Philadelphia, and then I eventually moved to Boston to continue my career there. So that's actually how I got into education to begin with. And while I was in the classroom, I just noticed a lot of inequities. Like I was very much aware of the racism. I saw the microaggressions that I experienced and other students experience, and even some of my colleagues of color experience from others who are non-melanated. I saw that. I've even experienced it myself. So those were things that I was very familiar with. But then you get into these inequities and you realize that you have students who come into classrooms feeling like they have to be a totally different person than who
Yeah.
they authentically are. And while I didn't have the language that I have now to articulate what was going on, I knew that was a root cause for a lot of the issues that were taking place. So when I transitioned abroad with my family in 2019, that's when I say I started my journey because initially I was going to get a job with the international school and it was a struggle to get my foot in the door. So rather than force myself into that space, I decided, all right, how can I stay connected to this thing I love called education?
Mm-hmm.
And I started a podcast, just like your podcast.
Yes. Love a good podcast.
Yeah. I figure I'm abroad. I'm going to be able to have access to other educators who are across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just started really getting into social media and following different teachers. And you had these teachers who were showing off all the cool things they were doing in their classroom and giving tips and things like that. And I said, oh, that's dope. Like, let me interview some of these people. So December 2019, I started my podcast, Identity Talk for Educators Live. And since then, I've been able to interview well over 200 different educators across different nationalities, different linguistic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. And I think as I started to interview different people, I was hearing all these identity stories that they came in with. And I saw a common thread, which
Mm,
was the fact that they didn't have the space within their respective school environments to have these conversations. So my podcast became the space where they were able to be a bit more vulnerable. They're able to be a bit more transparent and honest about who they were, who people perceive them to be in different
mm,
professional spaces, and how do they navigate life with all this going on? How do they make sense of their lives, and how does that inform their worldview? So I believe a lot of the conversations I had at the on the podcast really served as the catalyst for me writing my book, Learn to Relearn, which I know we're going to talk about.
mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the things I share in the book stem from the learnings that I receive from my guests over the past 5.5+ years. So that's really where my journey started.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful, right? And as you were talking, I was like, absolutely. Like the perception of who you are when you're in a professional space as a melanated person versus the reality of who you are and how you navigate those tensions. And then that's also happening with students, like
Right.
who they need to be, I say that in air quotes, y'all, like
Mhm.
and who they really are and what
Yes.
is allowed or accepted. And there are so many nuances to that space of identity, right?
Yeah.
There's just so many places we could go. We could have just an episode about that, like, right? For
You're
sure,
right.
for sure. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. I think that's really powerful. And I think I hear that a lot, right? People will be like, I was talking to other people and it made me think about X, Y, or Z, or I'd never thought about that way. And now I'm thinking about it this way. And that's one of the things that I hope people get from just this podcast. I think that's one of the things that's really important within your book is to, really understand, like sometimes we don't know what we don't know until we know it.
That's right.
And I know there's always a lot of tension around bias, right? Because some of these expectations are rooted in systemic inequities and racism, to be really hitting a button on the nose. And you may or may not realize that, because whether you are a melanated or non-melanated person, because that's the society in which you grew up in, and so it just becomes what it is until you realize that's not what it should be. And so that's where bias comes in. And that's one of the things I always like to talk about. I'm like, everybody has bias. All of us, we're a human being, we have bias.
That's right.
Period. Right? That's just the nature of humanity. The important thing is, do you recognize it? Once you recognize it, what do you do with it? How do you handle it? How do you act on it? How do you not act on it? Like, there are so many things around recognizing systems, biased systems, and your own personal bias, just having been in the world, because the world itself has bias.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it wasn't until I removed myself from that classroom teacher setting that I realized how deeply entrenched we are in an education system that perpetuates these biases that we're speaking of,
Mm, yeah.
right? It took me being out the classroom to have those reflections. Because one thing that you and I know is that when we're in the trenches and doing the work, we don't have time to have these long, drawn out reflections. We're calling parents, we're grading papers, we are backward designing, we are
We're looking
doing
at
all kinds
data.
of design, looking at data. doing assessments. There is so much that's entailed when we talk about the work of teachers. So, where's the time to do this deep reflection and come to this epiphany? For me, when I was writing Learn to Relearn, I was not in the classroom. I had lots of time to think back to when I was in the classroom, when I did engage in certain microaggressions, when I did have certain biases about different groups of people who came from backgrounds that I did not share personally.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really what it was for me. And then I also thought about my own journey, being a first generation Ghanaian American, people assuming that because my parents came from Africa, they weren't educated. Me starting my first 4 grades with an IEP and being in a self-contained special education classroom, people thought because I had that label, that wasn't smart.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to fight through that and overcome that. And
Yeah.
then, of course, when my family moved to Ghana, well, I moved to Ghana with my father and my youngest sister after my 6th grade year.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this is my country, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you see the flag right there. I start to go into school, and even though I look like them phenotypically, we're eating all the same cultural foods and everything. The minute I open my voice, oh, you're different. So now
Mm.
the othering happens in a space that is supposed to feel like home.
Wow.
So there is some isolation there. There is some, I don't, not division, but they definitely engage in that isolation where, all right, you're in this space, we are here. And I
Yeah.
understand it because I do come with a certain amount of socioeconomic privilege because
Mm-hmm.
of the fact that I have an American passport, because of the fact that I came from a household where both my parents were college educated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I understand that I'm able to access certain spaces that my classmates weren't able to access. Those were things that I was very much aware of. And it made me a bit self-conscious because I didn't want to be given preferential treatment because of that. I
Yeah.
just wanted to be a part of the crew. I just wanted to be just one of just like everybody else, but you realize that you're not, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't pretend as if you are. So I think for teachers, in order for us to really understand how our education systems work and how we play a role in keeping these systems functioning the way they've always done, is that we have to do our research. We have to ask the basic questions, right? Um, and it always comes down to the why. The why. Like, why do we
Mm-hmm.
believe the things we believe?
Mm.
Where do these ideas come from in our context? Who fed these ideas to us at an early age? Was it our parents? Was it members within our neighborhood? Was it friends, family members? Was it something that we watched on TV or listened to on the radio or a song that we used to sing all the time? Like, we get these messages from so many different access points, and it's not until you sit down and really think back to realize that, oh, I see why this is problematic now. I didn't know that before, but I do know now. And I still have these moments, even now as an adult. I still have moments where it's like, oh, like, yo, that used to be my song. I used to be singing all the time. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh yeah, I probably should have been singing that. Or we were
Oh.
watching this cartoon or this TV show. Oh, okay. Probably shouldn't have been watching that neither. So I think the more you start to clean those lenses,
Mm.
the more you realize. that, all right, there are certain things that we need to interrogate in
Yeah.
our world.
Yeah. I love that idea of clean the clean the lenses. There was a period of time where I was a professor working with pre-service teachers, and we read some of Lisa Delpit's work in her book, and we read Peggy McIntosh's Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that's exactly like what some of these future teachers said. They were like, it was like, they're like, I feel like my rose-colored glasses have been taken off and I have put on a new set of eyes. And they would come back and just start noticing things that they had not noticed before, just like what you said. And I think that that speaks to the human experience, right? Because once we learn something, we start to notice it. It even things like if you think outside of this conversation, it's just like you get a new car, you're interested in a car or something, and now all of a sudden you see this car everywhere because
That's
you
right.
now are thinking about it, right? Those cars were
Yeah,
always there, right?
always.
Always. You just didn't necessarily notice them. And
Mm,
I think that's one of the important things for me. Like, and I think that's one of the important things about this work and that what you're talking about is noticing and being able to start to name, noticing and
yeah.
naming. And then what do I do now? Like, what is the shifts? I'm curious, because you mentioned you started to think of, some examples when you got outside of the classroom that you might not have noticed when you were in the classroom. What are a couple things that you could share with people that you notice once you kind of were able to step back? Interested in learning more about equity coaching for you or your educators? Sign up for a free connection call with me, Dr. Tami, to discuss a personalized plan. The link is in the show notes.
Yeah, I think for one example that comes to mind immediately is like when you think about just students transitioning through the hallways.
Mm-hmm.
Why do the students have to be in a line? I grew up, I grew up having to be in line to go from one place to another. And I just thought that's what you're supposed to do. I never questioned it because I saw every teacher of mine organize their class that way when they're transitioning from one area to the next. But then when I became a teacher, I realized, yo, this doesn't make much sense. Why can't they just walk all over? I mean, yes, in some cases, you want to create space for those who are oncoming. I get that part. But does that have to be like a perfect line? If there's one student that, if this is the line and one student is like this, should I get penalized for that? Should a student get penalized for that? Are we
Right.
still in space for the oncoming students to go through without any issues? Like that's what I'm saying. Like it's stuff like that. And then also with regard to like uniform policy, which is a bit controversial.
Mm-hmm.
One instance, I understand why we do wear uniform, but I also believe too that a lot of it just kind of stems from I think about even like the boarding school era with indigenous schools,
Mm.
how how indigenous people, indigenous children were removed from their reservations and
Mm-hmm.
they were placed in these schools where their culture stripped, their traditional regalia and their attire they
Mm-hmm.
weren't allowed to wear, and that you
Cut
have
their
all this
hair.
stuff going on. Their hair as well. So we think about even with black and brown folks, we think about Crown Act.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why should I get penalized for having locks in my hair? You know,
Mm-hmm.
why can't a sister have an afro? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is that problematic? How does that have any impact on their ability to perform academically? Why is that a distraction for adults in those settings? So a lot of these things that we see in our classrooms and in our school communities, they all go back to history
Oh.
and all go back to history. And that's the reason why I felt like it was important for me to write this book because around the time when I was reading anti-racist books, it was always written in like generalities. There are some good books out there, but you didn't really have a book that really dug deep into the historical origins of the policies that we
Mm.
experience in our K-12 systems.
Yeah.
And we also didn't have a book that really touched on how that manifested in each of the main historically marginalized communities. So, for example, I made the example of the indigenous and native communities.
Mm-hmm.
How how are they impacted by the K-12 system? If we talk about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, how are the youth within those communities impacted by the K-12 system? And Latinx students, Hispanic students, how are they impacted by that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so on and so forth. And then you can throw in your LGBTQIA communities, your neurodiverse communities, students who have disabilities. Like they all they all stem from history.
Yes.
And in order for you to understand why the system's the way it is, you have to understand the history. So that was why I felt like it was important for me to do that research. And it's the reason why half of the book is about that. And then the second half is all practical because in order for you to understand how to approach different communities, you got to know the history of that
Yes. Yes.
community.
Yes. And that just speaks to, again, like the importance of this work. Like it takes time and intentionality. You can't just um hop in and be like, "Oh, I want to do this. Let me just do an identity map with my kids." So you do an identity map, and then you do, and that's it. Like that's where it goes. Like what are you doing with that information? Why are you asking them? I mean, that's
Mhm.
first of all a very vulnerable exercise, or can be for certain students, right? Um, because how much of what do they want to share with you? But you're doing this identity map for what? So then you go back to treating them all the same. Um, gosh, I'm like a little all over the place right now, but I keep like thinking about the walking in the line because when I worked in a school, we had to walk in a line and we had to walk. Our students were supposed to have their hands behind their back as they were walking.
They
Like,
in
so they had,
prison? What's going on?
they had to, so they weren't
You know what I'm
touching any,
saying?
so they weren't touching anybody. But I want everyone to think about that. Like, and I was a baby teacher when this happened. And I just think about that. Like, we are asking students to walk in a line with their hands behind the back. What visual does that give you? What is that emulating within a school, which should be a safe space? But that doesn't feel very safe to me.
Hmm. It doesn't feel safe at all. It doesn't. No.
No. And you were talking about uniforms. And this same school that I worked in,
Yeah.
we didn't have uniforms when I first started. And then because again, uniforms became as an exercise of control, exactly like what you were talking about. The student, oh, we don't want to have any problems because of this. Like the students were expressing their individuality with their clothes. That's what kids do. This was a middle school too. Like they're finding themselves. That's what we do as people. There's dress, food, all of these things, right? Hair, all of these things are a part of our individualized expression of ourself, but also connected back to, cultural roots a lot of the times too, right?
Sure.
So we want to strip all of that. We stripped all of that. They all had to wear uniforms. We're like, oh, it'll be easier. It'll be easier. It'll be less things for, but I'll tell you what, I don't know about your students in uniforms, but mine kept trying to find ways to still individualize their uniform
Hmm.
and how they, as much as possible, within trying to stay in the rules.
Yeah. You know what? It's kind of like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when Will just wore his blazer inside out. He's
Yes.
still wearing the uniform and he still looks pretty good. It's still the uniform. He just wore it inside out because he needed to express his individuality.
Hmm.
It wasn't defiance. It didn't hurt anybody. Everybody went about their business. But if you were to do that in real life, of course, this was a sitcom, but if you were to
Right.
do that in real life, the amount of vitriol certain administrators will have against that student. Mm. And I've seen it in my
Oh,
own two.
I've seen it too. Like, I could just, it's like I'm going back in time and like, it's like the body keeps score. I don't know if you read it, but I feel like it's going back in time because that was really a hard time for me because I didn't care. Like, I really didn't care. Like, y'all, why are you in these children's face?
Hmm.
Like, you're an adult, first of all. They're a child and you're in their face because they're what? They want one thing, one part of their shirt untucked and one part is tucked in because of whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
Uh, is that what we're here
Yeah.
for? We're here to police tucking in shirts, or we're here to educate and help students learn?
And as you mentioned that, it's something that I talked about in the intro of the book is this education versus school and conversation, right?
Hmm.
And I'm thinking about even my own K-12 schooling and the fact that you didn't have to be a strong academic student in order to get your diploma.
Mm-hmm.
If you were just a compliance student, if you simply listened to what your teacher told you to do, you'll graduate without a problem. At the minimum, you'll graduate.
Yep.
You may not have the highest GPA, but you will get a diploma. And it was the same thing with college. Think about when we went to college. Think about that one course we took that was kicking our behind. And, midterms was coming up. You looking at your current grade in the class, and you have to make a decision. Should I bail out now and just take the course in the summer? Or should I just take this midterm to see how I perform? And you hope that you could do that before the deadline to drop the class.
Mhm. Right. Yes. Very
You're
real. Very real.
navigating, you're learning how to navigate. And
Hmm.
here's another thing, too, office hours. Let's talk about office hours. You're struggling in a class, but you show up every day. You raise your hand. You're clearly engaged with what's going on. You go to professor's office hours every week. Hey, professor, I got this question on this thing. Can you help me out with this? They help you out. They see that you have the effort. Finals come. You still may be struggling a little bit. Maybe a lot of kids are struggling. What does the professor do? Curve the grade.
Hmm.
Now you've passed. But why did you pass? You didn't pass because you not for lack of a better term mastered the content.
Hmm.
You passed the class because you knew how to navigate the system. You knew that by going to office hours, you were showing investment in this professor's class, giving the professor the idea that you truly care. So it's not even so much about the content. Sometimes it's about the effort
Mm.
of what you're doing. And I'll tell you this, like I was a math major in college. My major GPA was barely over a 2.3, and I was a math major. But I graduated cum laude because I was getting like 3.5, 3.6 on my other classes that were outside of my major. And for some of those classes, I wasn't the strongest student, but I went to class every day. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't miss classes. I made sure to get there on time. But this is what it is, though. It's compliance. It's all about compliance. It's all about how you navigate, know how to navigate the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different type of knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, compliance. I I think about that a lot in our current
Yeah.
education system because we tend, and I say we only because I've been a part of this system, right?
Hmm.
And and educators ask students to comply and do things that they don't necessarily do as adults. They are unable to execute them as adults because there are unreasonable expectations on a person. And I don't know if there's enough thinking about this compliance, option. Like, I'm going to use the example, like if you're doing, and I've done, and I know you have too, right? Professional development sessions or, with educators. You're laughing because like, you know where I'm
I
going
know where
with
you're going
this.
with this. Keep
I
going. I know
know,
where you're
I
going with this
know.
too.
And you're
Uh,
doing that and they're doing 50 million 11 other things. They're talking, they're on their phone, they're like this, you're right? You ask them to have a small little group discussion, right? Because and they go and talk about something else. Okay.
hmm
So I'm not saying all that to knock teachers. What I'm saying is y'all don't even do what you're asking students to do because that's not human
Thank you.
nature. Like you're around people. Humans are social. And then we
That's
ask
right.
kids to come into a school space where they're not allowed to talk. Like, what? You know, so I always be like, that's how conversation works, you guys. If you ask somebody to have a conversation in a small group, and this is the question you've asked them, they will talk about part of that, but part about our brain is it connects to other things. And then it makes them think of something else. And then you talk about that. And then eventually it circles back to how that connects to the topic. But you happen to walk by when they're off, quote unquote, off topic, and they're like, oh, I can't let my students do group work anymore. Right? Or they're looking at their phone. Look, adults look at their phone more, same amount as kids do at this point.
Hey.
Like everybody's looking at their phone. So where I'm going with this is right. Like we participate in a different way than what our expectations are because of this
Oh, we're
compliance
hypocrites.
thing.
We're straight hypocrites.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Because, or like sit still. Like I always laugh because like my students in class would be like this, right? And then they would ask the little kids to like, you need to sit still on the rug. I mean, I have my own child when he was in kindergarten. He came up. I was actually picking him up that day. He was so excited to tell me about his day, and his teacher's like, "I need to tell you something." And I had to like tell her not to ever interrupt him when he's excited about his day to tell me something bad. But what she had to tell me
Mhm.
bad was he didn't sit still for 45 minutes while they were on the rug doing something. I said, "Wait a minute, you're telling me that my 6-year-old didn't sit still for 45 minutes, and you're surprised about that?"
I mean, he's 6.
That part.
Is it developmentally appropriate for a 6-year-old to be able to sit still for X amount of minutes?
Yes.
Man, I got a 7-year-old who can't always sit still. There's nothing wrong with him. He's 7.
Yes. And I think when we're talking about compliance, and this is what I've seen over like the, you know, 25 plus years I've been in education, what the expectations were when I started and where they are
Mhm.
now, and the pushback that's happened in grade level expectations that is not developmentally appropriate for kids.
No.
So we are now setting them up to fail, if you will, right? Because we're asking them to do things that they're not even developmentally appropriate. We're asking them to sit still for 45 minutes, which that teacher is asking that because that is part of a system that is asking her to do that. So here's the part, like, what do we do about that then? You have your book, you're going to be talking about, I know you talk about these things, right? But like at some point, the individual educators, and whether you're a teacher, whether you're an administrator, whether you're a district, like we have to decide that this isn't working and we need to do something different.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of teachers who recognize that it isn't working. I don't
Hmm.
think that's the
Yep.
main issue.
Hmm.
The problem is those teachers are fighting against forces which they cannot fight against alone.
Yeah.
And as a result, that's what leads to the lack of teacher retention, particularly for teachers of color,
Hmm.
right? That's what leads to teacher morale being down.
Hmm.
And quite frankly, this is why there's a hard time for this is why schools have a hard time recruiting teachers into their buildings because those teachers anticipate the type of mistreatment that they will receive.
Yeah.
They're anticipating these issues that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are happening. I think we have to redefine what success looks like. What does it mean for a school to be successful? I think people have their own definition of what success is. For some, it's how things look operationally.
Hmm.
Can you do a fire drill? Are students walking in line? Are we posting things on the bulletin boards? And that's another conversation because I've seen some very problematic things with regard to that.
Oh yeah.
But some people look at it from that way, from that standpoint. But there's some who say, well, success for me is making sure that our school is a learning environment that is joyful,
Yeah.
a learning environment that allows for students to be themselves and to express themselves in a way that allows them to build their own agency and criticality around the issues that are happening in our world.
Hmm.
See, when you teach a child to be compliant, that is the biggest disservice you're doing for that child because they never get the opportunity to learn how to think for themselves.
Yes.
And we're in a space where we need more students to question what's happening around them.
Yes.
Question,
Yes.
scratch your head. This doesn't look right. Well, why does it not look right to you? Let's go deeper. Like, we need more of that as opposed to, no, you can't say this. No, don't do that. Uh, no, this is how we do it because I said so. Like, we need less of that. We need less of that.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I am concerned that we're getting further and further away. Or let me say it this way, not actually in overall, especially with certain populations of students, we're getting further and further away from criticality and critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
opportunities to learn and explore history. History is so important. The humanities are so important. And if the current environment isn't an example of that right now, right? Like when you don't understand historical happenings and it's repeating itself in front of you and you can't even see it because you've never had the opportunity to engage critically with
Mm-hmm.
learning these pieces. Like we are pushing the curiosity out of kids. I have been in more schools where teachers are frustrated because they're bringing in more of a scripted curriculum. Like they're taking the professionalism out of the profession, number one. So that's going back to what you're saying, that it's hard to recruit people and keep people to stay when they don't feel like they're valued. And then you have students who are quite frankly bored because if you're doing the same thing every day, like filling in a blank, like underline that, like I always, I used to say this to my pre-service teachers: if you're bored, your students are definitely bored,
Oh, yeah.
and then that's when the behaviors happen. But when you are having engaging, thoughtful, critical thinking, exploring, experimenting, why do you think students love like to go do science class and like dig in and do stuff, right? Because they get to use their brain. Like, and that's what humans are meant to do. And we're like, no, no, we don't have time for that. We don't have time to explore this, or we need to just memorize these things and regurgitate them. And I'm
Yeah.
talking in such broad generalities right now, and this isn't everywhere, but when we see the push towards that, when we see the push towards you can only read certain things. And it excludes, coming back to the identity piece, excludes certain identities. And those
That's right.
identities still exist inside of our educational spaces. And
Yeah.
they're already low in representation in the first place. I don't know. I feel like we're on a train that's running towards the edge of a cliff with the tracks run off, and there's no more tracks.
Yeah, I agree with that part. I definitely do. Um, and I think it's tough because you mentioned how we do have scripted curriculums, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think as a teacher supervisor, as someone who has dealt with pre-service teachers, I think when you're someone that's first coming into the space, a scripted curriculum could be your best friend
Mm-hmm.
until you develop your own identity and you start to learn how to supplement. But before you can get to that point, you got to have the content knowledge, number one, but you have to have an understanding of your curricular framework, whether you're doing Common Core, whether you're a science teacher, you're doing next generation standards, whatever your content area is, you got to know that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I do feel that there are a number of teachers who don't believe that those fill in the blank, those low level kind of fill in the blank type of exercises are beneficial to students,
Mm-hmm.
but they do it because they're within a system once again
Yep.
that forces them to not be able to pace the way they want to.
Mm-hmm.
If I
Yeah.
have an inclusion class, if I have students with 504 plans, students that have IEPs, if I have students who are learning English as a second language in this one classroom, you can't expect me to finish a unit within the 3 days that you say it should be done. I'm going to need at least 2 more days to get through this unit.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the flip side of that. In the beginning of the school year, you are being asked to submit a student learning goal, a professional practice goal. Doesn't matter what state you're in.
Yeah.
And student learning goal, it may be something to the effect of I expect um, a 20% increase in my students' scores from the year before
Mm-hmm.
based off of these assessments, based off of this data, blah, blah, blah. You submit that to your principal.
Yeah.
Now you're being held accountable for that. So, what does that mean? Oh, I do want to do this exploratory type of lesson, but I got to get through all these different, I have to get through all these different objectives for this unit before this interim assessment, which is going to count towards my goal that I submitted to the principal.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I've been through this myself where I was doing things that I knew were not beneficial
Yes.
to students, but at the same time, I gotta keep my job.
That is real.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
I got a
Absolutely.
wife, I got a baby boy at this time. I gotta do what I can to keep this job. So if I have to do this, I'm gonna do it. But I am gonna try to sprinkle in some of the things that I want to do. I will sprinkle it in.
Mm-hmm.
Or better yet, I will do those things after we've gone through all the major tests because we all know that the state test is a Super Bowl. And once it's done, you can do whatever you want pretty much for the last
Look,
month and a half.
the
Let's
the high pressure Super Bowl that we place on everybody.
I
It's oh, like
mean,
the
yeah.
the stress of a snapshot in one day. You know, the difference is teachers don't get paid millions of dollars, what the people in the Super Bowl do.
No, they don't, unfortunately.
No, they don't. It's a little flipped, it's a little backwards. But no, I absolutely agree with you. I do think, and I hear and talk to teachers all the time that are very frustrated. But again, they need their job. They actually want and love being a teacher. And
Yeah.
so I think that comes back to what we're saying, like, right, how do we take what we know that isn't working or isn't best for kids, but also best, right, for the educators in the space either? How do
Yeah.
we do that? What are your thoughts? Like, how, because you're right, there are systems in place that an individual teacher can't necessarily change because they only have control of what they have control over.
Yeah.
But this collective, I don't know, how do we come together? Do you have thoughts on that?
I do. I definitely have some thoughts, and this is something that I've talked about on other podcasts too. And is actually one of the main reasons why I started my consultancy, Identity Talk Consulting. The tagline for Identity Talk is stay true to the teacher in you.
Mm,
To the teacher in you. What does that mean? It means regardless of what's happening around you, you gotta stay true to your moral compass, stay true to your guiding principles, whatever they may be, however you define them for yourself as an educator, and do what's best for students. And sometimes what's best for students may be you not being in the classroom with them. Let's talk about that.
mm,
You know, and I know it sounds ironic because I mean I'm talking to somebody who's working with pre-service teachers and you're encouraging them to be in the classroom and do all this incredible work. But I think what's most important is we have to get teachers into this pipeline who understand that there are systemic challenges that they
hmm.
will encounter,
Oh, yeah.
who understand that if they go right instead of left, even though going right was the best decision to make for their students, they're going to suffer some consequences that are totally unjust. If you are aware that this is going to happen and you still want to be a teacher, go for it. But I think what I've come to realize is you're able to do so much more when you're outside of that space. Because
Mm,
the reality is that system that we're in was never designed for Black and brown children to thrive. It was never designed for that to happen.
right.
And once you come to that realization, that easily informs how you navigate said system or whether or not you remove yourself from the system and do something that's totally not totally different, but you do more of what you want to do. There's a reason why we
Hmm.
have micro schools. There's a reason why we have home schools.
Hmm.
And there are a lot more of those options now post pandemic.
Yeah.
There's a reason why educators become consultants or coaches
Yes.
because there's a level of autonomy that you're able to have that you're not able to get when you're within that systemic space. So I think for those who are entering this teacher pipeline, they need to come with that understanding, number one, but we have to be able to be real with them about that and not sugarcoat anything. And we got to equip them with tools. Like we have to get them to see that when they go into this space, they're not, they are commodities, not employees. You're a commodity.
Mm,
You see what I mean? Like
yeah.
you have to approach it in that way. And I know this is kind of veering off to a different conversation, but it's still relevant.
Oh, totally.
Like, think about this, Dr. Tammy, the stuff that we create as teachers, the lesson plans, the projects, the dittos, the worksheets, the amount of time we spend supplementing. We do all that for free just to submit a lesson plan for the week, just to submit a unit plan.
Hmm.
All this intellectual property is monetizable. When you decide you're going to be a good Samaritan, when you decide that you're going to be someone that's invested in your school community. You know what? I love my colleagues so much. I want to do um, this PD session facilitate because I believe it's going to make us better as a team.
Yeah.
That may be true, but you know what? There are people out there that are doing the same thing you're doing and they getting paid money doing.
Yes.
But I'm not going to go too deep into that. But all that to say, we're not getting paid enough already, and we're not going to be put in a position where we're gonna be working like slaves
Mm.
and then still be expected to come back every year and produce at the same high level to the point where it's at the expense of our social emotional welfare.
Yeah.
And when we are in that position, our students end up suffering. That's the byproduct of that.
Oh,
They end up
absolutely.
suffering because we are overexerting ourselves and we're producing and producing and producing only to either find ourselves further in debt.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're going to be honest, they tell you, oh man, I can't believe I'm going down this path, but I'm going there. They tell you in order to move up the step ladder or the pay scale in your district, you have to do more post-secondary classes. You
Yeah.
have to get an additional cert, which does require you to go back to school more times than not
Yes.
in order to get the additional cert, which means you have to pay money for a licensure test, at least one licensure test, sometimes more than one, depending on what you're getting the license for. And then you don't always get grant money for that. You may get reimbursement if you're lucky, but the reimbursement caps at a place where you're not going to be able to cover all those expenses that you've incurred. But this is like a perpetual cycle. It's a perpetual cycle. And we find ourselves in this space where we're producing, overproducing.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting the wages that we should get for that. And then we still find ourselves in debt. 15, 20, 25 years down the line, we still paying
Look, we
back
ain't gonna
student.
talk about my student loan debt. But
I'm a shut up.
no,
'Cause
don't shut up.
I'm,
But
my loans
here's
are forgiven. But
look,
even that, Dr. Tammy, the way they did me, man, I did my 5 years like they tell you to do it. Teaching a Title I school for 5 years in a row. I did that, and here's how they got me. They got me because the first 4 years I taught was in Pennsylvania. Because remember, I started in Philadelphia.
yeah, yeah.
My license was in elementary education, K-6. So I was a sixth grade teacher my first 4 years in Pennsylvania, but it was within middle schools. So then I'm thinking, all right, I'm gonna go to Boston. I get my Massachusetts license, which is in middle school mathematics, K-8. I do my first year, which is my fifth year overall, right?
Yeah.
I submit my paperwork. I get my references from my past principals from all the schools I've taught in, submit it to my loan provider. They rejected me. And the reason why is because they go by what the state says you are. So the state recognizing me as a elementary educator, K-6, that I'm an elementary educator. When I submitted my application, I put in secondary school because I was teaching in secondary school. Sixth grade is middle school. Middle
Yeah.
school is secondary. But because in Pennsylvania, I'm classified as an elementary school teacher based on my initial cert in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, I didn't get credit for those first 4 years. So
Look,
as a result, I had to teach 4 more years in order to get my five. And it was under that middle school mathematics license, which clearly says middle school, which is secondary. So because the license said that for Massachusetts, I finally got the credit and then they forgave my loans after my ninth year overall in the classroom. But
look.
that's the BS that be happening.
Look, there's so much, like, don't get me started on PSLF and all that stuff and like the nightmare that is right now. But I
A
want to,
lot.
I want to say, you were talking, and I was thinking about this, and I'd never thought about it this way. Like when we were talking about the steps and like getting more
Hmm.
education, I totally did that. I went back and got my master's to move up, increase my salary. But the one thing that I didn't ever think about, and I just realized that right now, right? And I don't know how many people do. You don't ever look at the money you're investing in the education to get higher on the step of the salary scale, and does it actually pay off? So yes, you're increasing your salary, but you've outputted this money. Are you actually ahead or are you behind? I don't know, right? Because I personally at that time did not look into that. And I don't know how many people do, because you're like, oh, well, yeah, I need to make more money, so I'm going to go do this. And you don't necessarily do all the math,
That
like you
that
just,
part too.
you
But
don't.
check this out though. So yes, that part is true, and you've gone ahead and gotten dual dual or triple certified. You've taken the class you're supposed to take. You are at the very top of the pay scale. You cannot get any more money from this district. You decide, all right, I want to continue to apply for other positions. I want to be a coordinator or something like that within my district. You get punished for doing what they tell you to do. And how they punish you? What they tell you? They tell you, oh, I'm sorry, you way too overqualified for this position. But you've been telling me all these years that I should be going back to school. You've been telling me all these years to get multiple certs so I can be marketable, right?
Hmm.
Strong arming me to do that. I do that. I get all my CPD credits and all that. And you're not going to tell me that I can't even get a job because I am overqualified. So I'm getting punished for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And now I can't find a job to save my life. I've seen friends go through that.
Yeah.
Friends. It's just, it's ridiculous.
It's it's wild. It's wild. Um, I want to say one thing about teacher ed, and then I'm gonna ask you to share a pro tip with the listeners. I think you're
Yes.
absolutely right about teacher ed in that when you are a professor in that world, showing and opening eyes is really important. And I think, and I can only speak for myself and the programs I was in, but it was also important on like, then how do you navigate that tension when you get there? Because there's going to be tension between what you know is best for kids and
Yeah.
what you might be being asked to do. And so, what does that look like? And, I've always been a little feisty. So my students would be like, what would you do? I said, well, you can't necessarily do what I would do because I personally like believe this and move in this way, but that may or may not be exactly how you move, right? Like, you know, um,
Gotta be willing to give up something.
oh
Are you
yeah, I
willing
got
to give
myself
up
in trouble,
something?
right?
You know what I'm
But
saying?
but it was worth it to me because I'm like, you can't be treating my students like that. But that's just me and my personality. But I do think it's important, right? And actually, that was part of my dissertation. Like, we taught them all these things. What happens when they go out into the school district? That's what I was
Mm,
curious about. Like, what happens when they just even go student teach and get in this
sure.
environment, right? Because I'm curious. We're telling them all these things, and you're exactly right. That is why I shifted some of the things I do and how I do it because it gave me a different level of access. Because if I'm working directly within the system from outside the system, I can make some different changes than even preparing people to go into the system, which is wild,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I don't want people leaving the system, though. We need you there. But I think to me, we need to find a way to continue to build this capacity of those that are outside the system and inside the system to facilitate this change. I think your book is a great way to do that. You all need to go out and grab that, Learning to Relearn. I will also link it. Oh, yes. I will link it in the show notes for you as well. But Kwame, I always love to end with like a pro tip. Like, what is, we have talked about so many things. And again, I think we could have like 3 more episodes from the little nuggets that we talked about. But what's one thing you want everyone to kind of take away that they could go and try and do?
Mm. One pro tip. I would say Number one, yes, there's so many things we need to do as teachers, but I would just say it's so important to just be present for your students. Get to know your students. Build genuine relations with them. If you just do that one thing,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to go a long way for you. It's just going to go a long way. And let's be honest, when you see those same students 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're not going to remember what you taught them. Like I was a math teacher for 10 years, and most of the students who are now grown with their own kids, they don't remember me for the math. Yes, they remember I was a math teacher, but that's not what
Right.
impressed them most.
Yes.
It was the jokes. It was the fun times. It was the way that they felt and how I treated them when they were in my classroom. That's what they remember the most. That's the legacy that I carry. And I am charging folks who listen to this to try to aspire to carry on that similar legacy of just building good relations with students, because that's what's going to get the results that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always say you bring the joy. So bring the joy, bring the connection.
There you go. Bring
Yes,
that
I
joy.
love it. Well, thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Equity Hour. Please look in the show notes for a link to Kwame's book and stay tuned and remember to use your voice today. This wraps up another episode of the Equity Hour podcast with me, your host, Dr. Tami Dean. Make sure to check out the show notes for any resources, links, and next steps from today's episode. Head on over to Instagram and give us a follow at Dragonfly Rising LLC for more tips, resources, and opportunities to connect. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, intent is not enough. Action is necessary. How will you use your voice today?